Listening to the entrepreneurs come in and talk, I used to just feel like I could be one. I could work that hard. I was willing to take risk. I was willing to change. I loved the idea of pursuing new opportunities and there being no ceiling. I loved all that. So I resonated with that.
No unicorns, no brands. Just hard-working people who built their business from the ground up, sharing their experience so others can learn. Presented by Larissa Feeney from Kinor, this is Real Business Conversations.
Hello, my name is Larissa Feeney. I am CEO and founder at Kinor Finance and Business Services. Today, we're meeting an entrepreneur who has created a leading education business in the financial sector. She shares her extensive financial knowledge with audiences worldwide and trains international professionals, as well as launching a number of books and a financial education program for teens. It's a pleasure to welcome Chartered Financial Analyst and the positive economist, Susan Hayes Culleton. Hello, Susan.
Hello, Larissa. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited about our conversation.
I am so excited to have you, and I can't wait to hear about your journey, Susan. I would love if you could start, please, from the beginning. Tell us about where you come from and your family.
So I grew up in Dripsey, County Cork, went to school in Coachford, and I am the eldest of two. So Mum stayed at home with us, and Dad, first of all, worked for Telecom Éireann. I always say my dad brought the internet to Ireland because he pulled cable with the first fibre optic in the country. And then after that, he went on to work as a delivery driver after Telecom Éireann then changed the nature that they had in Ireland. And all throughout my schooling time, Larissa, I would say that I was very much a studious student, but I was always very ambitious. And no matter what I wanted to do, I kind of wanted to be great at it if I could. But I really didn't have business on my radar when I was a student in secondary school, because I thought back then you needed to have a delivery van and a building and a canteen and all sorts of things, because being a child of the 80s and 90s, like there weren't such things as cloud services and there wasn't such things as co-working spaces, and we didn't have software as a service and all that type of thing. But if I go back earlier, when I was 3 and 4 and 5, I remember having businesses where my teddies were my clients, and all of this was acted out through my imagination. So then by the time I left school in Cork, I wanted to become an actuary. I had studied Irish, English, maths, applied maths, physics, chemistry, accounting and French as much as I could with a number. So I wanted to do something hard with maths and that I thought was going to lead me in an interesting direction. So I did financial maths and economics in Galway. But the key thing that changed then was that I joined the Business Society in college. So I was in Galway in 2004 until 2008. At that point, like, we were in the heart of the Celtic Tiger. At the time as well, like the course that I was doing was growing in the number of points, because that area was growing in the area of prestige as well. Actually, as it is now, it was very much an in-demand career and thus an in-demand college course. And also, little did we know it, but as I moved through particularly third year and fourth year in college, of course, then the financial crash was happening. So I graduated in May 2008. And the difference at the time was this. All throughout college, we were told how employable we were, and we were going to be able to command all sorts of wages and everything else like that. And by the time we came out, the term pay freeze was becoming more in everybody's lexicon than anything else. Of the 30 of us that went through the course, I was the only one that went on to set up my own business. 5 of the 30 went back to do teaching and are continuing to be maths teachers today. A range of them did go on to become actuaries. Some went on to emigrate to the land of opportunity, etc. And it was at that stage then I decided to start working in an entrepreneurial sense and then set up the company in 2010.
Wow. And what led you to set up the company? And like, why not go down the teaching route? Why not emigrate? What was it was it the Business Society? Was that what triggered the interest in business?
I think 3 things. I think first of all, I always think if you really want to know what somebody wants to do, watch what they're doing when they're playing with their toys and they're not thinking about CAO points, or they're not thinking about permanent and pensionable, or they're not thinking about the job opportunities or the salary. Like when you're a child, a young child, you're just doing what you're interested in. And there's great insight, I think, to be gotten there. So first of all, I would say, because of the interest that I had then and all along, it was just naturally in me. And no, I also don't think every entrepreneur needs to be like born an entrepreneur. I certainly don't think that. But I had a big interest in business from a young age. The second thing was definitely BizSoc. Yeah. Coming in and listening to the entrepreneurs come in and talk every Monday night at 6:30 in college. I used to just feel like I could be one. I said, I could work that hard. I was willing to take risk. I was willing to change. I loved the idea of pursuing new opportunities and there being no ceiling. I loved all that. So I resonated with that. Interestingly as well, Larissa, I was actually the first female speaker, if you could believe it, for BizSoc. Later on, I was one of the founding members back in 2004, and it wasn't until I was in third year in college that I actually was a guest speaker for it myself. And when I think back as well, I had this book called Successful Irish Businesswomen that I used to read when I was in school. And Gillian Bowler was in it. Frida Hayes was in it. Maya Doherty was in it. Like, their individual names. They weren't now like it is where there's lots and lots of people. But then the third thing that definitely had a big influence as well is that when I was in second year in college, a company called, what's now called Gillen Markets, came in to speak to us. And they came in to talk about how we could get started in the stock market. And they were a business themselves. So they came in as a speaker. And I don't know where I got this from, but I always used to go up to the speaker at the end of when they were speaking, and I used to ask them for their business card. And because I thought, you never know where I could meet these people again. And I used to thank them for their time. And I used to, give feedback on or what I thought of what they said. But this particular time anyway, this company was there, Gillen Markets. They were selling a training course about getting started in the stock market. But my feedback this time was, I said, I think you're mad. I said, we don't have the money to put beans in toast. Never mind pay to learn how to invest the money we don't have. And I said, but if you let me go on your course for free, I'll do market research for you for free. And I said that to the three people working in the business at the time. One was Rory Gillen, who is the man behind Gillen Markets. And I would always say he was the man that taught me how to invest. The second person was Kieran Murphy. He was the co-founder of the business at the time. And he offered me a job afterwards. And the third one was Ardal Culleton, who I went on to marry. So an influential day indeed, Larissa. And of course, Ardal Culleton is the Culleton of Hayes Culleton. So he's my co-founder as well. So because I started working with Gillen Markets, it was a very small business at the time. And it was about training people in finance. And that really was very influential on my early career, I would say, for sure. So because I think it was always there was a latent interest that just needed a trigger. Because I had the role models of BizSoc and then the actual tangible opportunity that presented itself and that I brazenly ran towards back then, I think that really was a catalyst.
The day that changed your life, Susan.
Oh, 1,000%.
So you left college and then you set up the business. So in the middle of the financial crash, in the middle of the recession, the same time as I set up the business as well, actually. Very different world to where we are today. Where did you start? What were your services at that time? How did you find your customers?
Yes, very, very different, Larissa. Very, very different in many ways. So back then, we was primarily me for a start. And it was, by then, I was, after working with Gillen Markets, I had spent 5 years working in that business where we were training people around the stock market. I was also at this point, after starting off becoming studying my CFA exam, my Chartered Financial Analyst exams, I had a really keen interest in the stock market and a keen interest in the markets in general. And I had my financial maths and economics degree. So if I package all of that together, what I was selling at the time was financial training, where I was either training audiences who could have been working in financial institutions to upskill, or at the time as well, might have been retail investors who were trying to navigate. I could also do a whole back then around what the financial markets were looking like at the time. But people who were starting to maybe buy and sell online or look at exchange traded funds or different things like that. So it really was me. It was me selling financial training at the time. But from day dot, I wanted to bring the business international because that was also part of the dream, I suppose, in one sense. But there was a very harsh economic reality, which is that Ireland was what it was. So then I started looking at how we could start bringing the business abroad. And by January 2011, I had my first flight booked for the business out to Malta.
And that was just what was going to be my next question, because you expanded very quickly into different markets. What took you to Malta? Because Malta was amazing for you, Susan. And what took you there? How did you get access to that market originally?
So here's where Enterprise Europe Network plays a very starring role in the direction of the business. So by now, I'm doing quite a lot in Ireland. So what I didn't appreciate at the time, Larissa, and I think it's important that I point out, they say that luck is opportunity met with preparation. And the financial crisis enabled an opportunity that I didn't realize was as sharp as it was, I suppose. And that is that everyone was talking about the bond market. Everyone was wondering, how do we protect ourselves from big risks in the future? Everybody was talking about how safe are such and such investments. Everyone was talking about the value of the euro and so on. There was a massive expansion of the need for expertise in financial services in Ireland. And that hasn't been there since. Like that, I would say from around about just after Brexit onwards. Like then if we only had a financial training business in Ireland today, I don't think we'd be in business today. And I think a lot of businesses would say the same. If like we're 14 years old, if we were still doing what we were doing 10 years ago, we wouldn't, the world moves on. So as I say, from day dot, I wanted to expand abroad anyway. And I made a promise to myself that I would take every opportunity, no matter how big, small or scary. And that didn't take long. When you have that mindset, you switch on the antennae then to find what's out there. So a trade delegation from Malta was coming to Dublin. It was through Enterprise Europe Network and it was being organised through Dublin Chamber. So Dublin Chamber is a subset of Enterprise Europe Network, as is all the local enterprise offices now. So anybody who's listening to this today has access to Enterprise Europe Network today. So I was on the mailing list and a trade delegation was coming to Malta the week the IMF was. And there was snow on the ground, right? The IMF was at the top of Marion Street in doing what they were doing, and at the bottom of Marion Street is Clare Street, and in Dublin Chamber, a trade delegation from Malta had come. So I went anyway, and in I went, and at that stage I was like, Susan and her financial training, open to whatever. And there was two people that I met. One guy was a guy that was very appropriately looking into Dublin for opportunities for people who wanted to manage their own funds. And then the other one was the equivalent of the local enterprise office in Malta called Malta Enterprise. So I had a great chat with them and all that sort of thing. But after I came away that day, I said to Ardal, my then boyfriend, now husband, I wonder what would happen if I went over there. Like, what if I just went over to Malta? Because I know two people over there now. But imagine if I just went over and followed up in those meetings and, I looked into what was possible over there. And Larissa, it was €30 return to go to Malta in January 2011. Like, this is the thing at the time, is that the opportunity cost of doing this is practically negligible. But here's where the magic happened. And here's where I'm very going to directly answer your question about getting access. I went back to Enterprise Europe Network and said, I'm following up on your trade mission. I'm going to go back. These are my dates. And they said, who do you want to meet? And I said, maybe people in financial services, people in economics, anybody who might be Irish, the media, and anybody in education related to financial services. And I also said, the Irish Embassy as well, if I could. And I kid you not, they came back with an itinerary with 15 meetings that turned into 25 meetings by the time I had finished. That's the difference, is that they actually put together that itinerary for me. That is what Enterprise Europe Network does, and it's phenomenal and free of charge.
That is amazing. So Enterprise Europe Network, I've written this down. So they are a Europe-wide organisation, and you said the Chamber comes under it, the Leos come under it.
Yep. So it's now worldwide. It was only European at the time. So basically all of the contact points in Enterprise Europe Network is your local enterprise contact point. So the local enterprise office in Donegal or the local enterprise office in Cork or Dublin, they're all part of it now. In Malta, Finance Malta was part of it. So it's like all of the Leos in Ireland talk to each other, but through Enterprise Europe Network, all the equivalent of the Leos in Europe and quite a significant part of the US, Middle East, right around the world, that is the way in which they can talk to each other. So it'd be like this. Larissa, if you rang me one day and you said, Susan, is there any chance you'd meet Mary down the road who runs such and such a business? Like, I would absolutely take their call because it would be you who would be telling me about it. Now, if Mary down the road was to send me a cold email, there might be a different reaction. And that's what EN is built on. Is so instead of me trying to reach out to somebody in Hungary or in Malta or in the UK or anywhere else, it would be like me going to my Leo, the Leo contacting the respective Leo there, and that respective Leo who has got trusted relationships with these people, then saying, will you meet Susan from Ireland? She's over. And that's the way it is. So it's just about really shortening the feedback loop so that relationships can accelerate an awful lot faster.
So if I'm a Leo client And if I've identified an opportunity in Malta or Germany or France or wherever, I can go to my Leo and say, can you introduce me or set me up with a meeting with the equivalent in that country?
Yep, you can. And there's also a huge database of people who've got profiles there as well, where I might see, okay, here's Kenor. I see that they provide company formation services and I'd really like to talk to them. So then I would click on your profile and I'd say request an intro. But instead of you getting that, like let's say we might do on LinkedIn, the Leo would get that and my respective Leo would get that. And therefore they would say, dear Leo person there, this particular business in Ireland would like to talk to Larissa. Could you set up a meeting with them? And that's it. Now they also have, and we'll see how many stories we can fit into the time that we have, Larissa, but they also have then a really big events database as well, and they subsidize a lot of them. So I went on a trade mission in 2015. It was just after the referendum, not Brexit itself. Sorry, not in 2015, 2016. It was just after the referendum. And there was a trade delegation being led by London Chamber out to Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Sharjah. It cost 150 sterling and I went on that, and that opened up so many more things as well. So I go on a trade mission every year, typically through there, and the database of events are all there. So it's phenomenal. It was transformational for us.
That's a really great takeaway for anybody listening, that database that you talk about. So, do a bit of a Google to Enterprise Europe for Enterprise Europe Network and on their database of events. That is amazing. Susan, what happened next then? So you worked in Malta for a few years, didn't you? You were over and back?
Oh, for years and continue to be, yeah. So then we started giving training then for the Bank of Valletta in Malta. We were working with the Maltese Institute of Accountants. I was doing loads and loads and loads over there. And I was continuing to be over and back several times a year, right up until COVID. I was due to be there in March 2020. We rescheduled it until June 2020, and we obviously we know what's there. There's a new opportunity developing there now that I'm actively working on. So what happened then, though, Larissa, that was January 2011, and after doing that trip, first of all, I was terrified going out there. I thought the world was looking at me, and I didn't know how to be relevant. I didn't know what is it that an Irish one-woman band at the time could bring to the table. I didn't know. And the answer is go out and ask. I went out. One thing that I've developed in business that I think is a really important skill is simply listening to the market. You're exceptionally good at that as well. You're really, really good at that. And we've had lots of chats about it over the years, whether it is, now, whether it might be listening back to client calls, or whether it is looking up rather than looking down, whether it is being curious when you're talking to customers about what their challenges are and seeing how you position it. So that's really what I did. Is I went out there, I went on to all the meetings. What I was offering was financial training at the time, but I was open to writing in the paper. I was open to speaking at events. I was open to building relationships back in Ireland. I was open to whatever came, but I did have a specific call to action, which was that we were selling training at the time. So anyway, I came home. And then the world of export was open to me, because then I said, okay, well, this is possible. This is really possible. So what started to happen then from there was the next place that we started doing business in was the States. We have a client there, and we've had a client ever since 2011 called Vector West. We met them at the Traders Expo in New York. That was, again, a very natural fit for us to go. And Larissa, I'll tell you, I walked that expo. I walked it. I had my bio, and again, I was ready to go in. I was saying, I like the States, very different to Malta, as you can imagine. And this was the Traders Expo in New York. And I walked and I said, I'll write and I'll do podcasts and I'll do this. And I was just looking to see how we could start building relationships. But I went on this training course with this company called Vector West. And by the end of the day, because I was on a training course, I was simply hungry to learn at this point, and I wasn't looking for anything from them. But I was asking enough questions, and I was highlighting solutions, I suppose, sufficiently that highlighted that I knew what I was talking about, to the point of where 2 days later, they actually rang me and said, we're actually looking for a company who could help us to build and expand and grow in Europe. Would you be interested? And then that was how that happened. Again, opportunity met preparation, which is called luck there. And we built, so we've a team now where we've a team in Belgium that they're all subcontracted there, work for us there. We're looking to expand into the French market there with them now. And we've been on a really big journey with them over the years. And then if I was to get on to the the next thing I suppose that was happening at the time was I was really busy. Like I was working very hard, and that hasn't changed, I suppose, to a degree, but the work that I'm doing has changed. But the first time that I started working with, not employed by us now, but the first time I started working with somebody was then I was doing a little bit at the time for the professional development services for teachers all around the economy. And I was very much there speaking at the time as well. Of course, Larissa, I started to develop the brand, The Positive Economist. That was another accident of sorts because I was being interviewed every week on 4FM by Gareth O'Callaghan. And, every week they'll introduce you to something else. Like, if I was describing you, I might say, our wonderful entrepreneur from Donegal, and then somebody else, another time I might say, well, this is one of the top people who is working in accounting across the island of Ireland. So, every week they were introducing me as slightly something else. One week they called me a recessionista at the time. And this was back in 2009. And then the next week he called me the Positive Economist. He said, no matter what state the economy is in, Susan Hayes will find a way to be positive about the opportunity that's there. And I said it to Ardal later on that day. I said, oh, that's interesting. And he said, why don't you secure the domain name? He said, it fits you perfectly and you could start writing a blog around it. So back then, and this is why I'm saying, I'm referring back to when I was referring back to the changes that have happened, like everybody was starting to write a blog and put it in their signature. And that's how I got the title. So I was simply putting it as a link under my name. And then people started calling me, oh, here we have Susan Hayes, the Positive Economist. That's how that happened. I didn't
But that
decide.
wasn't something that, you didn't decide. That's just what I was going to say. But it was the message that you were sending. It was very authentic to you, to use a word that we would use now about how we show up online, being authentic. That was your authentic self. You were naturally positive about the economy and nobody else was, Susan, at that time. You stood out because nobody else was positive. Everybody was talking about doom, doom, doom. And you were able to stand out from the crowd. And so it worked for you, and it worked. And you didn't give it to yourself. It was given to you.
That's the thing. I remember Vincent Brown interviewing me a little bit later on, and he said to me like, oh, who called you that? Yourself, is it? And I said, like, I didn't come up with this. So at this point then, a woman called Trudy Murray, she and I were working together on a resource for schools. And then she says to me, I would love to write an economics textbook for Leaving Cert. She says, would you be on board for that? She was a teacher. I was an economist. At the time now as well, I was starting to study my Chartered Financial Analyst exams. And I had 5 years under my belt at this stage as well in Gillen Marcus. And then I was about 2 years, about 2011 as well. I was about 2 years into or on the journey towards having delivered financial training over that period of time. So I said, yeah, sure. Now, as I sit in front of you today, the 7th book is soon going to print. One day as well, I got a phone call from the newsroom. Something had happened in the UK. Lloyds Bank, the government was thinking about reprivatising Lloyds Bank by giving options to householders if they were going to be able to buy shares of the company back. And so the newsroom rang me and said, would you come in and explain what does this mean to the nation on the 1 o'clock news? And tell me, do you think it could be something that Ireland could do as well? And in that 30 seconds, Larissa, was replayed again at 6 o'clock and replayed again at 9. Penguin, Ireland, Random House now saw me that day. They were looking for somebody to write a book around women and personal finance. And then they said to me, would you be interested in writing a book? And as Richard Branson says, say yes first and figure it out later. Because I hadn't, in both cases, I had never written a book before. But I was very passionate about trying, and that's how Positive Economics and the Savvy Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom came to be.
And if I was to put my hand way back here, I have the Savvy Woman's Guide in the cupboard right here beside me. So we've got the financial training, the books. So this is all ongoing at the same time. But that wasn't all that's happening, because you also do a lot of speaking. So talk to us about that.
That was where the Positive Economist came into her own, I'll say, is because at this point now it's very both observant and kind of you to say that there was few enough voices, let's say, who were positive at the time. Now that people didn't always like that, Larissa, because I used to often get a lot. I won't say flack. I won't go that far, but I remember being introduced one day on the radio where somebody said, who will remain nameless, and here we have the Positive Economist who completely dismisses all the bad news that we've been hearing about in the news this morning and says, don't mind any of that at all. Everything is rosy and sure. So now we're just going to bring her on the line. And I just remember hearing that about myself And that's what some people thought the positive economist was Pollyanna, or was somebody who just put on rose-tinted glasses and said, never mind all the bad stuff that's happening. And that, had I been that person, that would have been very, very insensitive to be like that. I wasn't like that at all. What the positive economist was, and still is this is the situation we're in now. What opportunities are there? As time was going on then, people wanted to hear from somebody that was able to point out opportunities that were available in the workplace, in whatever sectors, and then combining the attitude I think that I had and have, but combining the attitude of looking for the opportunities, but coupling them then with fact. And I remember it was November 2013. I spoke at an event in London. It was for the Irish International Business Network. And I'll never forget the reaction after it, because I started off by talking about the top three things I used to always talk about at the time was our foreign direct investment, our exports, and the number of businesses that were starting at the time. And Larissa, like, yours was one of them. Do you know what I mean? Yours was one of the businesses I was, not your specific company, but I'm saying you were one of the people who were starting companies at the time. And I was talking about those three things. And I said, no one is giving attention to the fact that these three figures are really, really impressive. Then I said, right, now we've got three big problems. One of them was housing, one of them was the government deficit, and then the other issue was unemployment. And I got into the nuance of that, and I showed where things were bad and things were changing. And then I used to talk about other things that were improving, like the assets under management in Ireland at the time, absolutely flying in under the radar. Also, I was talking about the big development that was happening in education, particularly around lifelong education. And then there was always one other thing that I would pick up on that was happening. So this was the Irish diaspora in London at the time. And I'll never forget the reaction to it, because people came up to me for hours afterwards, because it was one of these conferences that went on then for drinks and all that. And they just said, like, the narrative out of Ireland has been so bad. Like, we didn't know that there is anything good apart from what I'm hearing at home or on the phone. But they said to actually give that overall macro perspective that it's actually not all bad and that things are actually improving it was really, really, really different. And that was where I suppose the speaking kind of came from, was that after that I said, right, I need to be able to nuance down what I speak about. So then I said, look, I'm somebody that can speak about entrepreneurship, the financial markets, and economics. But I said there's three things about me as a positive economist. One is that I'll always focus on the opportunity. Two is I practice what I preach. And I'll tell you, if I'm recommending you go to Enterprise Europe Network, it's because I have gone there. And I'm selling you, this isn't a website with like, go and check out these things. This has been my story. And I said, the other thing is that when I speak at something, I want it to be practical and implementable, like I want to be here with you today, Larissa. So that's how the speaking came about. And then after that, then I started developing my own way that I MC. I MC things quite differently. I've developed my own way of MCing. I have a few things that I do that other people don't, that again have just come together over time. I absolutely love to speak at events, and I love to interview people, and I love that the pressure, I suppose, that comes with the whole idea of so many people coming together, people giving up time of their day, interviewing people and really asking the questions that other people might shy away from or not think about, and truly connecting with an audience so that you can be a bridge between the solutions to their problems and understanding what their problems are, all through the lens of a conference or an event. Nothing like it.
And you do it so well, and you play whatever role is necessary and needed for the day, the occasion, the audience, and the message. You know, you're very unique in the way you do it, and well, you know that we love how you do it, Susan. Now, I want to talk about Savvy Teens, because that's another strand, and I think it's really important because you're an example of how you have multiple streams of revenue and income in different areas. And I think you've managed to spread yourself across different areas so well and become an expert in several different areas. And you're very unique in that way. I can think of very few others that managed to have done what you do. How did Savvy Teens come about then?
So Savvy Teens happened whereby I was speaking at an event in Waterford, and a woman came up to me afterwards. Her name is Monica Murphy, and she said to me, I'd love to set up, as she said, a kind of a finishing school for teenagers where they get to learn things that that nobody has responsibility for teaching them at school. And I said, and why don't you? And she says, I think I'd need an investor. And I said, I don't think you'd need a money investor. I said, I think you'd need a time investor. And later on that night, I got an email saying, well, do you have time? And Monica set up a business. She had set up a little bit after I had, same year as you, she had set up Moneer, and it was it's for a brilliant business that focuses on soft skills development and focusing on interview skills and all of the things that businesses need, but that people need to work in them effectively. And then I had the financial side. And both of us faced a similar challenge, which is that we were both facing quiet summers. So I was only delighted to think about an opportunity that would do something around that. So what we developed was a summer camp focusing on careers, communication and confidence. But it was really tough. It was a really, really tough business because we didn't have direct competitors, but we had a lot of competition, and the competition was what we had at the time was 15 to 18-year-olds coming on a week-long program during the summer. Our competition was computer games, sleep, part-time jobs. I don't want to be going to some school-like thing, holidays, the lot, right? And so we were trying to navigate all of that. And then we were also charging parents to send their teenagers on it. So anyway, we did it for a few years, and we always did a great job when we got the teenagers into us, but the challenge was actually getting to that point. Anyway, in 2018, Monica and I decided to go our separate ways. We decided that we were going to go two different directions. So then I bought Monica out. But what happened at that stage was we were starting at that stage to do Savvy Teens for companies, say like yourselves, where we were going to be running a program for the clients of the company. So therefore, number one, the company was going to be paying for it, so the parents didn't have to. And number two, this was a thank you. So we were doing this and all was going well. But here was the pivotal point. I got a phone call from the one company we were dealing with around this at the time, who said, Susan, love what you're doing with Savvy Teens, right? Love the content of it, but is there any chance at all you could do something like this for transition year rather than during the summer? Sure, Larissa, the problem that I was facing all along, the solution was staring me in the face. I was afraid that we couldn't get teenagers because they were off. Sure, it was the total opposite was the case. Just the time they were in school was the time they were looking hungry for doing something like this. So then, and as it is today, so Savvy Teens runs transition year work experience programs now, company-specific ones and sector-specific ones. And we run up to 3 a week, every week, between the middle of September to the middle of May. And that is so Savvy Teens was a totally different ballgame. That totally changed everything then. So now, if I was to describe to you what it's like today, for example, we run the Society of Actuaries Transition Year Work Experience Programme. So we have teenagers from all over the island of Ireland who apply for that one. We run a 4-day programme where we give an insight into what it's like to be an actuary. And it's really, really hands-on. It's really interactive. It's hard work for them, and intentionally so, because that's what the world of work is like. But we run STEM ones, we run financial services ones, we run ones for specifically sustainability focus, whether it might be for people from disadvantaged communities or where we need to take care of a wider diverse selection of people that might be traditionally in an industry. Yes, so now we work with tens of thousands of teenagers every year.
I'm like, wow. Like how all those different streams that you have, right? And those areas that you work in. Susan, how do you manage to divide your time? Like, how do you do that? Are you very strategic and looking ahead and saying, okay, I'm going to work this week on that and that week on this?
I'm smiling here. If anybody can't hear it in my voice, I'm telling you, I'm smiling here at this because I'll tell you how, Larissa, is because to borrow your own phrase, I have spent 14 years taking off hats. And that is something that you talk about, is where back when I was like Susan, the financial trainer, there was just me. And I sent out the invoices. I brought in the business. I delivered on the business. I was upskilling myself. I was doing all that. Like, to a large degree, what has happened over the years, like I've told you about the new products and services, but of course, internally, as you well know and have done such a super job of, is then you have to build, now you have to really build a company. That's not just a business. Now we have to build a structure where, so now we've client account, we have a client account manager who takes care of the Savvy Teens clients, for example, where I'm not taking care of, sending across the detail on what needs to be sent out to the parents, or the cert, this completion cert. I'm not the person who designs that. I'm not the person who gets the content ready anymore. We have people now who do that. Also, we now have 3 facilitators. So it's not just me that the teenagers meet anymore. And like I mentioned, we have the team in Belgium now as well. So, and then the other thing is that, again, I know that you're a big believer in this, is we have been very Strategic, yes, but curious and hungry to see how we could lever technology to do the things that people don't need to do. And that both of those things have been really, really important. Both of those things have, and so by looking at how do we bring in people to do the things that are needed now at a company level, as opposed to, oh, Susan just does that. That bit has been really important. And then looking at how do we automate, how do we create a new system, how do we lever technology, not to just replace what a person can do, but actually augment it. And as a result of that, I no longer am the only client account manager. I took off that hat. I'm no longer the only facilitator. I took off that hat. I'm no longer the only person that works in business development. So for all those reasons now, I am typically the person that, by the way, when it comes to speaking events, there is only me. There is only one positive economist. There is only me. But for everything else, for what we do with VectorVest, for the financial training, for Savvy Teens, for even building out the technologies now that we have, we've people now for all of those. And so therefore, in short, Larissa, I took your advice and I've been taking off hats as I've been going along and just seeing how we can really build the foundation that goes well beyond me to enable us to do that.
And that's, I mean, the secret, isn't it? The delegation bit, and it's handing over responsibility. So it's delegation in a way, but it's also handing over responsibility, taking off the hat completely and saying, okay, that's up to you now to do that. You could only do a certain amount before something goes. And by doing what you've done, you were focusing on the important stuff, the value add stuff. What was your first hire? And when was that? Do you remember?
Oh, I do, yeah. So her name was Julie. She was with us for 8 years, and Julie was in the audience at a Network Galway event. And I know you're a big fan of women in business networks and an ardent supporter of them. So I was speaking at Network Galway, and Julie came up to me afterwards that night, and she said, "Could I follow up on an email?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And I will never forget on that email, Julie said, "I'd love to have a call with you. What would be your expectations for that call, and how could I exceed them?" And I never forgot that question, because that instantly differentiated Julie for a start. So I met Julie afterwards anyway, and we took her on, and she was somebody that helped me with content. And like the blog was really important at the time. It was like, search engine optimization and all those sorts of things. Julie and I worked together on the books then too. We also worked together on the Savvy Women podcast back when I had it. We worked on a range of different things and digital marketing, and she was great. She was really, really super. And I remember feeling that sense of, I remember the first time that sense of Julie was doing something that really made a difference to my day, from a productivity point of view. But it was what she used to question me on, and it wasn't just what she did, it was the challenge that she posed to me. It was the brains that she also brought to the operation. Also, it challenged me, it challenged my thinking. She brought a different skill set, etc. Now, she's still with us today, but probably the biggest difference that it came to my own ability to delegate, or even, no, I'll go beyond that. Again, it's something you talk about, Larissa. You talk about how when you're somebody in a business and you have staff, that they protect you, that not everything needs to get you, like not every email needs to get you. And the one for sure that does that for me is Caroline, my executive assistant. Caroline, we took on, I was really tired it was International Women's Day 2013. I was really, really tired. The Savvy Woman had just been published in January. It was 3rd January 2013. As you can imagine, International Women's Day and Enterprise Week was happening. And so therefore I was doing an awful lot. And I remember going to her house in Athlone. And I was going to her house anyway in Athlone. And I remember sitting there, and her fridge was organised according to like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I remember thinking, if only my inbox looked like that, because it was blowing smoke at the time. And not alone that, then she basically gave me a little lunch, and a serviette to give me on the way home, because she says, "You're too tired to cook yourself this evening," of which was very accurate. And Ardal and I, since my 3rd week in business, we meet on a Friday night for our board meeting. And that Friday night, I was telling him, and he saw how tired I was. And he was the one actually that said to me, I was telling him about Caroline's fridge, and he says to me, like, what would you think about asking her to maybe do some work with us? And I said, I was actually thinking the same thing. And I reached out to her, but she turned me down, Larissa. She said no. She only told me afterwards, she kicked herself after that, because she said, like, I should have gone back. I'd love to have said yes. I didn't know what you were really asking me to do. So I did go back and ask her again, because I said, look, I really think you'd be very good at this. And then Caroline did join. She joined us in April 2013, and we have her since. And that was really, really, it's what you're describing. It's take away the administration. She prevents problems from getting to me, and she protects me. She really does. And then when we introduced the role of the project manager and the client account manager in our business, that was much, much, much later on, because there wasn't projects to manage. I was doing the kind of the client management, whereas when Savvy Teens got to the stage of where we're having a TY program every week, like, nobody wants to just start thinking about this on the Monday morning teenagers arrive. There's a lot of preparation that happens in advance, and I was beginning to not be able to respond. People were happy with what I was delivering. They weren't able to get to me fast enough. And Caroline wasn't necessarily the right person to be answering questions about that. So we introduced the client account manager then, and that has certainly made a huge difference. And so many other things as well. But, you talk about delegation. I used to think that delegation was about delegating tasks, but actually it was 2023 was the year I really worked on delegating decisions. That's another one, because if you can delegate, if you can really drive decision-making down through the business, that's when you unlock your own, you stop being a single point of failure and you stop slowing things down. Because believe me, I'm telling you a lot of the highlights today, but there's been many times over the years when I felt a failure because I wasn't able to do everything, or people were waiting on me, or I wasn't being responsive enough, or times that like two business ideas that we had didn't work out at all. There's been many times over the years when I've been the problem. I've been the asset and the liability at the same time. And so I found that by helping people make better decisions and giving them the autonomy to make them, and having their back if they go wrong, because sometimes you can make a right decision that has a wrong outcome, that's been a more recent development that has really made a difference too.
How did you get to that place, Susan? Because what you've described is very typical of a business owner, and you're absolutely right in what you say. What changed for you? Like, why are you suddenly now, and it's not a sudden thing, I know that, but what did anything change for you that made you realize or made you understand that delegating the decision and being happy with the outcome, whatever that is a good thing for the business?
Yes, I can pinpoint the day and the hour, and that is in February 2020, I was in New Zealand with the Department of Foreign Affairs for St. Bridget's Day. And of course, we all know what February 2020 predated, which was March 2020. So of course, I certainly didn't see what was coming with the enormity that it was. But here's how bad it got, Larissa, is that I was that busy that I flew home from New Zealand after working 8 days solid out there, delightfully. And I was writing book number 5. And I had 4 hours in Sydney airport. And I did not have time to go into Sydney on the way back. I had to work. And what's more is I remember being on the flight back, and I was really tired after, we'd say, the week over there. I knew that I was going to go to an 11-hour time change. I knew I was touching down in Dublin on a Monday morning, and I was going to be back in Savvy Teens on Tuesday morning and having a meeting there at 9 a.m. And I had to write a chapter of the book on the air. Now, what quality do you think I was going to be able to write that book chapter on? Never mind when I was putting my body through, my mind didn't have any time to rest. And I remember when I was sitting in Sydney and looking, it's 15 minutes on the train. That's all it is. And looking, I could see the city. And Sydney isn't a place that you kind of ramble past every day. And I just remember thinking, this is crazy stuff. Like, I haven't even the time to be jet lagged. And also, this was the time that I remember feeling like I was really failing. I was really, really failing, because no matter how high, no matter how much I worked, I could never reach the bar of workloads that I had. And I had people then, like Julie was there and Caroline was there, but I just didn't know how to delegate it well. So anyway, March happened. As you know, a third of the business disappeared in a couple of phone calls. It was really, really scary. And then I felt guilty. Then I felt guilty for feeling like I had felt. Because then I felt guilty for being a failure originally, that's how it felt. Then I felt guilty for the fact that I had been bemoaning the fact that I was busy. And then it was gone. And then I got scared. And I don't know, do you remember, the business continuity voucher came out during COVID. It was one of the local enterprise office supports, which was there to help businesses like pivot with massive change. So I applied for it anyway and I got it. And I remember talking to my coach about it, and he asked me to do the wheel of life. And if anybody isn't familiar with that, so it's you draw a circle, you draw 8 spokes. It sort of looks like a wheel, and then you pick 8 things that are most important to you, and then you give yourself a score between 0 and 10. And if this rather balanced, then the wheel could roll. But if I gave myself 1 for my, say, personal development, and I gave myself 10 for money, for example, well, we have a bit of a problem here. And I remember I gave myself a 6 out of 10 for all that was happening in the business at the time. And I'd say I was putting 80% of my waking hours into it. And I just remember coming off that call, being in tears, going like, oh my God, how can I be getting this so wrong? And the thing was, Larissa, that like, to a large degree, I was succeeding because I was busy with doing all that I was doing. And I was fighting to get the business, like to get the business back over COVID and so on like that. But I wasn't building a company to be able to handle it. What I was doing was I was building a busier business. And it was becoming more profitable and with growing sales, all that sort of stuff. But it was really establishing, like, I'd hit the ceiling and it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable because the more I grew, the more, and even the fact that I'm using that word the more I was growing, I wasn't bringing the company with me. So through the business continuity voucher, my coach worked with me at the time to really help me understand what delegation really meant. And then over time, I've worked at my own decision-making and delegating decision-making. But it was that was the time. And I, it's important that I admit these things, because if we don't talk about what we're really thinking or feeling at the time, well, then we're not really showing what it's really like to be in business. That was the only time that I thought, I don't know if this is for me anymore. And that was a scary, scary, scary place to be. Really scary, because when you set up your own business and you run your own show and people want what you have to buy, I remember that feeling of, is this for me anymore? I was just burnt out. I was emotionally and mentally, and probably heading for a physical burnout. And then COVID happened. So then of course the world had to change. But I think if it hadn't, I don't know where I'd be, but something had to give all right.
And I love the description of a journey of a business whenever we talk about, first it's I, then it's we, then it's they. So what you've described there is the transition from I to we. And that's a really difficult transition from I to we. And it's a difficult transition from we to they. Susan, I could talk to you all day, but unfortunately we don't have all day. I do have a couple of questions that I just noticed that I made whenever you were talking. A common theme from your story that I picked up from your story from the very beginning right through to today is the importance of relationships and building relationships. So could you maybe talk to me about that, like the networking element of what you do, or how important it is networking to you, or is this something that you do intentionally? Because I have a conversation internally with my team about the importance of networking, and in a remote team and a post-COVID world, we have to be much more intentional about this than we ever would have been in the past. It seems to come very naturally to you, how you build relationships, and you've almost grown your business out of the relationships that you've grown.
Mm-hmm. All relationships are critical in our business, but I enjoy them. Like, I like spending time with our customers, and I like, Larissa, I thoroughly enjoy the time that you and I spend when we are working on various different things together, etc. But I will tell you what I'm very intentional about. It was my New Year's resolution in 2015. And that is, I'm not entirely sure where I got this from, but it's a keeper. And that is, I work on deepening my relationships rather than broadening them. So what my tagline to myself was, I suppose, that year was network within your network. That was it. All I sought to do was to just strengthen the relationships with the people that I had. And then that organically developed into me having broader relationships as well. Because when people know who you are and they trust what you do, and they know that, and they know who you are, like they know who you are, they know what you stand for, or they know they know what you really do and or how you can be good at it, then I find that your network can broaden. So that's what I would be intentional about, is rather than going to something, or rather than seeking to like gain new followers or whatever metric one might have for their network, is that rather than more, I was looking for more of, just to have a better relationship, let's say with you, or to have I go over to VectorVest for 2 weeks every year to Ohio. And I don't do that to get more business, or I just go over to see what's going on, to hear what I don't know, to see what doesn't come up on a Teams call. Like, you're really good at going around and visiting all of the different parts of the business in your own case. And you do that for a reason, is to go and see, well, what doesn't appear on a screen, or just what isn't on an agenda, or what isn't discussed what could be discussed if you didn't just have an hour for the meeting. And that's what I do. So partly I really enjoy it. Does it come naturally to me? Perhaps it does, but I enjoy it fundamentally. But the second thing that I do is simply to strengthen what I have rather than grow the number of them. And as a result, I grow the number of them anyway.
And that comes across really strongly, from you, how much you enjoy it, how much you get from it, how much you learn from those interactions. You always talk about things that you've learned from other people and conversations that you've had with other people. And that really comes through very clearly from you. There's another New Year's resolution that you had that I think about all the time, and that's your thinking breakfast. I think this is really important for anybody listening. Now, I have to say, I think about it all the time. I don't do it all the time, although I would love to do it all the time. How does the thinking breakfast help you, Susan, run your business?
So where I got this from, I like trying out New Year's resolutions before I start them. So it was in December 2020, and the restaurants were closed. You could only sit outside, and it was December. It was freezing. And I remember every day of that particular week in December just going out for breakfast and stopping and thinking about something. Now, that something could have been a LinkedIn Live that I was going to do, could be a sales proposal I was going to have, could be an outline of a session that I was going to present on, etc. And I just remember how enjoyable it was, but also how absolutely productive it was. So what I do is that I go out for breakfast every morning. Now, when I say I go out, I just don't have it at home, right? So this morning, in the company where I'm working today, I came in here early, I sat down and I had breakfast here, and I had my coffee, and I always write in a napkin. The reason that I do that is two things. One is there's a lovely disposable feeling to a napkin. So it's not like in a notebook, because if you write something into a notebook, you see it often until you throw away the notebook. Whereas I love the temporary nature and the disposability of a napkin. And the second thing is now my hand is used to the feel of it. So now this is the smell of the Americano and the touch of the napkin is what triggers my brain into thinking breakfast mode. And I simply give myself the time to stop and think. And most of the time I'll have something to think about. For example, today I was thinking about what I would talk about in this conversation. While, just for your listeners' benefit, I didn't know what you were going to ask me today, Larissa, and everything that we said today is entirely, first of all, authentic, but it's not like I had anything pre-thought about. But what I actually thought about this morning is I thought about all the things you've taught me. And I thought about how you say things like, I take off the hats and so on like that. And I just said, I really want to make sure that when I am answering the questions in this podcast, that I wanted to highlight, not because it's you, but because it's really beneficial to hear what you respectively have to say. So I thought about those things that I've learned from you over the years. And that was what I spent my breakfast talk thinking about today. Sometimes I'm entirely stuck. Sometimes I could be overwhelmed, or I could have no idea where to go. And so I use an AI app called Rocky, ROCKY.ai. And that talks to me. So that's an AI app that doesn't actually talk, but it coaches me through that. Sometimes I have too much to think about, and then I have to navigate. I have to choose what I'm going to pick, and then also the thing I have to do is when I never know why companies or restaurants give out napkins for free, because they're magnets for ideas. So then, of course, the next thing is I have to figure out then when I'm actually going to implement what's there. So I have all sorts of napkins in my bag, and they're magnets, absolute magnets. They're gifts. So that's what I do, and I do it every single business day.
Susan, the idea you put in a napkin, do you then email it to yourself or put it on a vision board or email it to the team? What do you do?
Yeah, well, it depends what it is. So if it's for the team, I might create a Loom, which is our tool for recording video, and I send it to them. It could be ClickUp is our project management system. It could be there. I don't have a rigid platform for that, but Larissa, I've gotten very good at thinking, because I do it every day. Like, I've gotten very good. I can think well now. And I can think, the book Thinking Fast and Slow, I haven't read it yet, but I know how to do both of them. I know how to come up with answers quickly, and I know how to slow down my thinking. But it's also really enjoyable. Like, one of the things that I think is so important about being in business is it is so busy, and it can be so demanding, and it can be a roller coaster, be all those things. But where sustenance comes from, I think, is enjoyment. And I really enjoy this part of it. And so like you mentioned there a good while ago, you said, it's really important that I free myself up to do the strategic work. This is it. This is it. So many answers to things have come from here, or the detail for vague ideas have come from here. I love the thinking breakfast. That's another keeper.
That is, oh no, definitely. And I commit to implement it in my life in 2025. Susan, I have one final question for you. You've given so much value to me personally, and I know to anybody who's listened today. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time. My final question is, what is in your future? What are your plans? What's the future of the business as you see it right now?
Well, yet again, you appear in this part of the story, Larissa. I'll tell you where the area that I'm most excited about, where there is a real scale, and also where things are really happening. And that is managing industry school collaborations. So I'll give you a very specific example that's happening. So we're running an initiative supported by Intertrade Ireland called Engineering Across the Border. And this is where we've got 6 schools and 6 companies. And the 6 schools are working on activities so we've built our own app, and there's various different activities in there. And the 6 schools and the classes within them are working on activities related to engineering. And here's where the magic is happening. We've matched them up with companies who are giving them feedback on their work. And the reason I'm saying this is where the magic happens is, so the schools are doing real life examples of work. And the second thing is then the companies are giving them feedback on the work. And then the third thing is the companies are hosting them for a site visit. And then all of this is culminating up then on a showcase in a couple of months' time. So we've been doing this in Cork. It's called the STEM TY Challenge, similar example. We had the showcase of that just yesterday. So it started off with 24 teenagers in 3 schools. And now we're up to 216 teenagers and 10 schools. And that showcase happened yesterday. Engineering Across the Border is in its first iteration. We're now talking to companies about doing this on a financial basis. So where teenagers would be doing possibly accounting tasks in school, but people like, say, for example, people who work in Kenora would be giving them feedback on them. And let's say Kenora would host a site visit, and then there would be a showcase at the end. This, I think, is, first of all, it's really scalable through technology, I know what it's like to work with teenagers day in, day out with savvy teens. So it's taking that and weaving it in with the work that we've done through writing the textbooks and with the technology that we have and the industry relationships. And a big problem that I'm hearing in industry is that the feedback loop between industry to third level back to school is too slow. Is that the graduates that you need or the staff that you need, are they learning in school what they need in order to get to that point? But I can entirely shorten that by simply doing that, is giving the tasks to teenagers to pitch at their own level and giving them industry level feedback. So it's initiatives like Engineering Across the Border, STEM TY Challenge. There's others that we're working on now, like I say. That's where the real scale is helping industry and education meet in the middle and removing all the friction that prevents that from happening. And I'm really, really excited about that. So that's the present leading into the future, Larissa, as I sit here in front of you today.
That sounds amazing. And I cannot wait to see what you do with it. And I cannot wait to hear about your 7th book. And I'm really, really grateful for you spending the time with us today, Susan. Thank you very much, Susan Hayes-Culleton, the Positive Economist.
Thank you, Larissa.
Thank you for listening to Real Business Conversations with Kenora. For more information on this episode, see the description area of this podcast or visit our website, kenora.com. Remember to press follow on your podcast player now so you get a brand new episode every single month. This podcast is produced by dustpod.io for Kenora Finance and Business Services.